Hello everyone, welcome to the online learning channel. My name is Brad and I will be assisting you today with English, specifically focusing on the grade 12 curriculum. And when it comes to the grade 12 curriculum, the aspect of English that we're going to be looking at today is writing and presenting, specifically focusing on the idea of essays together with transactional, say, pieces. So without further ado, I would like to share with you a PowerPoint slide presentation that will just guide us in our conversations that pertain to the idea of either writing and presenting an essay or a transactional piece. All right, so like I said earlier, this refers to the aspect of English that is known as writing and presenting, and typically we are looking at essays together with transactional texts. So now when it comes to the actual English home paper language, it's number 3 rather. It is now focusing on section A and section B. So section A is the essay section of the paper, and section B is the transactional text section of the paper. You'll notice that the essay section is out of 50. You are required to write 1 essay that is worth 50 marks, and then you are required to write 2 transactional pieces that are both worth 25 marks, which would then total 50. So now when it comes to the actual, say, paper itself, you are to answer 1 question from section A and 2 sections from section B. You must take into consideration that planning is imperative. So when it comes to planning, the use of a mind map, the use of a diagram or a flow chart, putting together keywords, for instance, editing and proofreading your work, together with planning, the overall, say, production of your final piece must be clear and must appear before the actual answer itself. So when your planning is complete, you may draw a line through it just to indicate to the examiner that this is in fact your planning, and then your final presentation will be, of course, the final product. You are strongly advised to spend your time as follows. So section A would strongly recommend that you spend about 80 minutes covering that particular section, and then section B, I would strongly suggest that you spend about 70 minutes in total, 35 minutes per transactional text. Okay, so we're going to be looking at section A first. This is the essay-based section of the paper. Now, your instruction is to write an essay of between 400 to 450 words, roughly speaking, that's 2 to 2.5 pages on one of the following topics. Okay, so as you can see, you've been given a list of topics to choose from. And again, when it comes to making a choice, you need to make a choice that best suits you, not only in terms of your interest, but also in terms of your ability to write a comprehensive piece that pertains to that topic. You are specifically required to write down the number, the title and/or heading of your essay, so as to give the examiner an indication as to what exactly you are, in fact, focusing on and what topic you are writing your particular essay on. Okay, so as we can see, this particular list goes as follows. The first topic is a quote by the Dalai Lama. Remember that not getting what you want is sometimes a wonderful stroke of luck. So when it comes to these topics, even though this is a quote and topics to follow may not necessarily be a quote, it often is very open-ended in terms of what exactly the topic refers to. That's the beauty of this particular, say, format. It is giving you license to elaborate on a particular topic as you see fit. So in essence, the examiner is now looking for creativity, originality, authenticity, especially when it comes to bringing across your piece, because of course, only you can elaborate on a particular topic in terms of your own experience and in terms of your own understanding. Okay, so the second topic, peaceful protests, the only option. Okay, so again, open-ended. You obviously would then take this into account and try and apply it to a particular event or a particular series of events that you may have come across or experienced yourself. The final hours, this is the third topic, the final hours. Okay, sounds quite dramatic, so that's just license for you to, again, elaborate on this dramatic, say, notion that the final hours are now approaching. The fourth topic, I have spread my wings under your feet, tread softly because you tread on my dreams. Okay, so this is again a quote by William Butler Yeats. Okay, so I've spread my wings under your feet, tread softly because you tread on my dreams. Okay, so again, what could this be referring to? Well, at the end of the day, it is up to you. And in the fifth topic, they learned about the brutality and the beauty of life. They learned about the brutality and the beauty of life. Okay, so again, when it comes to they, you would obviously have to elaborate on who exactly this refers to and what exactly their experiences have been up until this point in time. Okay, especially when it comes to the beauty and the brutality of life itself. All right, so now when it comes to writing and presenting, there is not only the option of necessarily focusing on those written topics that have been presented, but there are, of course, also a series of visual images that you may also elaborate on within this particular section. So these pictures may reproduce, these pictures produced below may evoke a reaction or a feeling in you or stir your imagination. So based on your response to the image, this may stir some form of imagination within you, or bring about a reaction or a feeling of sorts based on what you see and based on how it is that you relate to this particular image. So your task is then to select one picture and write an essay in response to what you see. So you are to write the question number down. In this case, there are three choices: 1.6.1, 1.6.2, and 1.6.3. And you are essentially given license to also provide a title for your particular image that you have now chosen. Now, you must also note that there must be a clear link between your essay and the actual picture that you have chosen. Okay, so here are a couple of examples of the pictures that you may come across in your examination. This is, of course, just an example, not to say that this is, in fact, the actual image that you will come across. So the first image is entitled Stepping Stones. And as we can see, this is a young lady that's now crossing over a river of sorts or a body of water, courtesy of the stones or the rocks that are just above the surface of the water itself. Then we have an image of a house that is being almost not quite torn in two, but certainly divided. And of course, this is evident in the title, a divided house or divided house. So as to what that refers to, well, again, the choice is yours, but one would argue that in this particular case, because it is typically a household that's being portrayed here, it may indicate that there's some kind of division or some kind of separation going on between perhaps family members within the household for whatever reason. And then the third image is entitled Girl with the Kite. And as you can see, it's a pretty straightforward image of a young girl that is flying her kite and clearly enjoying herself as a result. Okay, so when it comes to section A, this is just a table that gives us an indication as to how exactly your essays are assessed by the examiner. Pretty important information to be aware of that you may not necessarily have been aware of previously. So in terms of the criteria that the examiner looks for, so when it comes to the content and when it comes to the planning, this comprises 60% of your eventual mark. So again, an emphasis needs to be placed on the fact that planning needs to be evident and needs to be constructive and needs to be done in a way that really produces a quality final product. And then, of course, the content, the actual, say, information that you offer and that you write within your essay is going to be judged accordingly. Then 30% of your final mark will be then dedicated to the language utilized within the essay, the style, and the actual editing that is evident within your essay. Obviously, the editing would take place in the planning section, but the style and the tone, together with the language utilized in your essay, is going to be marked out of 15, which would then equal 30% of your final mark. And then the actual structure of the essay, how it is that you structure the essay, is going to have an impact on your final mark. You can see that 10% of your final mark is going to be assessed on your ability to structure your essay accordingly. Okay, so when it comes to section B, this is the contextual question, if you will. So again, when it comes to section B, this is the transactional texts. Again, 60% of your mark is going to be assessed on your ability to provide adequate content, to plan accordingly, and as well as providing a sound and appropriate format for whatever transactional piece you decide to elaborate on. And then 40% of your mark is going to be assessed on your ability to make use of language effectively, to bring about a particular style, and then of course to indicate as to where your editing has been utilized, or where it is that you have edited your particular piece, which then would total 50 marks in both cases. Okay, so an important note to bear in mind: the points given below each topic in these marking guidelines serve only as a guide to the markers. In many respects, when it comes to marking essays, a lot of it does boil down to personal interpretation and personal, say, awareness as to how it is that the actual essay is being brought across. So a fair share of allowance must be made for a candidate's own interpretation of the topic, even if it differs from the given points or a marker's own views or interpretations. So the examiner will never judge your essay or your contextual item according to their own, say, viewpoints or their own opinions. It's very much based on how it is that you as the student bring across your own interpretation of the topic, and how it is that you share your viewpoints. Okay, so now when it comes to section A, and when it comes to focusing on the essay section of this particular paper, we can see that this is out of 50 marks. And if we look at the first question, remember the first question was a quote by the Dalai Lama that went along the lines of, remember that not getting what you want is sometimes a wonderful stroke of luck. Okay, so not getting what you want is sometimes a wonderful stroke of luck. So despite you really longing after something or desiring something for whatever reason, and the fact that you don't get it at the end of the day, sometimes opens other doors to other, say, opportunities that you may eventually pursue or eventually undertake. So in this particular case, just a suggestion, just a couple of points that I'd like to share with you in terms of how you could take on this essay. So your responses should focus on the benefits of adversity. So anything that perhaps you have experienced when it comes to adversity, or that you have seen others experience when it comes to adversity, that's essentially what you should be focusing on when it comes to the central theme, because in many respects that adversity has often resulted in more positive experiences or more positive outcomes further down the line or in other respects. So you are to be given credit if you offer any opposing views. Okay, so any opposing views that just bring in this kind of idea as to when adversity is experienced, there often is light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, so the second question, peaceful protests, okay, the only option. So in terms of how you could respond to this particular question, candidates, you as the students, may argue for or against this assertion. Okay, so when it comes to arguing for or against the idea of peaceful protest, the only option, you may bring in the idea that in fact, it's going to require maybe more than peaceful protest to bring about actual change. So in this case, peaceful protest should be juxtaposed, even if quite briefly, with violent protest action. Okay, so often is the case that throughout the course of history, peaceful protests haven't quite achieved the outcomes that were initially, say, conceptualized or initially thought of. And often, unfortunately, has been the case where a little bit of violent action or protest action has had to take place in order for any change to be evident. Okay, so the third topic, the final hours. Okay, so when it comes to the final hours, often is the case that this is one of the more open-ended, say, topics. So credits will be given to any literal or figurative or mixed responses when it comes to this particular idea of the final hours. It could literally be anything that you are given license to elaborate on, whether it's literal, whether it in fact did happen, or whether it's figurative, something that you've made up now on the spot. Okay, question number 4. I have spread my dreams under your feet. tread softly because you tread on my dreams. Okay, this is a quote by William Butler Yeats. So your responses could focus on the vulnerability of dreams and respect for the feelings of others. Okay, so the vulnerability of dreams and respect for the feelings of others. This is essentially what your response could initially focus on. And again, credit is given to any literal experiences that are now shared with the examiner, maybe a personal experience or a family member that you've shared an experience with. Or, of course, once again, it could be a literal response, a figurative response, excuse me, where you, again, just come up with something courtesy of your imagination, or it may be a combination of the two. Who knows? You may just bend the truth slightly, so to speak. Okay, number 5, they learned about the brutality and the beauty of life. Okay, so now when it comes to they, again, you would have to just elaborate on who exactly they refer to. And when it comes to your actual item, it should focus on responding to, the idea that responses should deal with contrasting experiences of life. Okay, the fact that in some cases life has presented some fantastic, opportunities or fantastic experiences that have been had, or anything along those lines, and then at the same time there have been some seriously difficult times, there have been some significant hurdles you've overcome or significant challenges, and ultimately it is up to you at the end of the day as to what you would like to elaborate on when it comes to the use of literal versus figurative language. Okay, so now when it comes to the actual images, images 6.1.1 to 3, something that you may take into account when elaborating on these particular items. Again, it's a case of making a clear link between the essay and the picture chosen. So the first picture, stepping stones, again, credit will be given to any literal, figurative, or mixed responses. Again, a very open-ended, topic as to what you are elaborating on is essentially up to you based on what you interpret by the image, of what you see in the image and what you gather or reflect upon when you see the image itself. Then a divided house, again, credit will be given to anything that's literal, figurative, or a mixed response, perhaps something that you've experienced yourself or something that you've seen others go through when it comes to a divided household. And then the girl with the kites, again, credit will be given to literal, figurative, and or mixed responses. It's again up to you completely. Make use of your imagination, be creative, think not necessarily out of the box, but just try and be as unique and as authentic and as original as possible when elaborating on those particular pieces. Okay, so then we go on to section B, which is focusing on transactional texts. Now, remember, when it comes to transactional texts, there are various categories that define transactional texts. So, as you can see in the left-hand column, we are making mention of the fact that it may be a letter in the form of a letter to the press, a formal letter or an informal letter. It may be a CV or a covering letter. It may be an obituary. It may be a formal or informal report or review of a newspaper, magazine, or an article, editorial. It may be some form of agenda that's being portrayed in the form of a meeting or minutes of a meeting being taken. Or it may take the form of a dialogue or some form of interview or informal or formal speech. So essentially, these are the different categories that you would typically come across when it comes to transactional texts. Now, when it comes to transactional text, it's important to bear in mind the language, the register used, the style, together with the tone. It must all be appropriate accordingly to the context, and that you are also tasked with making a choice between two particular pieces that are both worth 25 marks each. So it's important to choose the two texts that you are most familiar with, not only in terms of the actual style and the structure of the actual text, but also in terms of, what you feel comfortable elaborating on. Okay, so candidates are required to respond to 2 of the topic sets, and the body of each response should be between 180 and 200 words, 20 to 25 lines in length on a standard A4 piece of paper. Okay, so if we take into account section B and a couple of the categories that you typically would come across. The first may be a formal letter. So remember, when it comes to a formal letter, the letter should request financial or material support, or it could be requesting financial or material support. It could be a convincing motivation that needs to be included within your actual letter. The format, you need to include your own address, the date, the addressee, the subject line, the salutation, and the signing off, of course. Okay, so that's pretty much the dynamics that go into a formal letter. When it comes to a dialogue, the conversation should take place between the person whose reputation has been compromised and a counselor, parent, or authority figure. This is just an example that you may make use of, and you need to use valid dialogue format when it comes to producing a dialogue. Informal letter, the letter should elaborate on the writer's response to the text message. The format, again, your own address, date, salutation, and signing off. Okay, so this can be one approach that you can take to an informal letter. When it comes to a magazine article, the article should focus on the writer's views on a particular music genre, for instance. The candidate should then defend his or her preferred genre of music. And then the format, headline, byline is optional, but certainly a headline would have to be evident within a magazine article. A covering letter and a curriculum vitae, so otherwise known as a CV, excuse me. So the covering letter should be a brief outline and motivation, just indicating as to why you are applying for this particular position. The curriculum vitae should include essential and relevant information as stipulated in the advertisement. So everything that's stipulated in the advertisement should then tie into what you can offer the organization in terms of your skills and your qualifications. So the covering letter and the CV should be marked as a holistic component. The examiner will not mark the two separately. It will be more so a case of taking into consideration both and marking them accordingly. So now when it comes to taking the minutes of a meeting, minutes should reflect the items on the agenda first and foremost. Resolutions taken should reflect the matter under discussion, such as, for instance, vandalism of the library in this particular case, as an example, and the format, use of suitable headings and subheadings so as to indicate what exactly is being discussed and what exactly is being elaborated on in that particular agenda. Okay, so now when it comes to a formal letter, just a couple of guidelines as to how you can elaborate on a couple of key points or a couple of points of contents that would typically be brought across in a formal letter. So you would like to raise funds for a charity that is close to your heart. Write a letter to the owner of a prominent local business to request support for your venture. Okay, so that may be the one say topic that you would have to do. For dialogue, your reputation has been compromised after your involvement in a controversial issue. You have been summoned by a senior person to account for your actions and your words. Write the dialogue that transpires. Okay, so this particular section of the presentation is very much giving life to what we discussed previously in terms of what a formal letter could entail, what a dialogue could entail, what a CV and curriculum vitae or as a curriculum vitae or CV as well as a covering letter could entail. So this is just giving it some life and fleshing it out in terms of what you could receive in the examination. So when it comes to an informal letter, you have received a text message that has provoked or pleased you and or you feel that responding to the message via your cell phone would be inadequate. Write a letter expressing your feelings to the person from whom you have received the message. Okay, so a text message in this particular case is not quite going to cut it. You feel that you need to respond in a more, say, personal manner, if you will, utilizing an informal letter. A magazine article, you are a follower of a particular genre of music, which is frequently criticized. Write an article for a youth magazine in defense of this particular genre. So whether it be, rock and roll or jazz or pop or hip hop or R&B, whatever genre of music it may be, clearly it's being criticized for some reason or the other, and now you feel the need to respond to that criticism by defending that genre and just indicating as to why it is such a impressive genre and a genre that you've taken a particular liking to. So when it comes to a covering letter and a curriculum vitae or a CV, local business owners have launched a competition for an aspirant entrepreneur or aspirant entrepreneurs. Young adults between the ages of 17 and 21 are invited to apply by submitting a covering letter and curriculum vitae. So write the covering letter and curriculum vitae, which you will then submit in response to this invitation. Okay, so pretty straightforward in terms of what's taking place here. A competition has been launched and applicants are now being given a so-called, broadcast message, if you will, that is inviting them to apply for this particular entrepreneurial venture. Minutes of a meeting. The local library has been vandalized. As the secretary of Friends of the Library, you have now been given the task to record the meeting or the minutes of the meeting, special meeting that's been convened in the City Hall. Write the minutes of this meeting using the agenda below. Okay, so whatever agenda is being attended to, you would then be expected to write the minutes of this particular meeting. So in this case, opening and welcome, okay, to this particular meeting. You would then note the attendance as to who is in fact present versus who is not present. If there have been any, say, if there have been any apologies by any of the members as to why it is that they cannot attend, you would then address the issue of vandalism, specifically vandalism of the library and how it is that that has taken place, the recommendations thereafter as to how you would address this, and then of course, finally, closure. Okay, so this is just another example that I'd like to share with you, just so that you can see it at face value in terms of what a letter to the press or an editor of a particular newspaper may have been. In this particular case, it's addressing the issue of the coronavirus and the rise of infections that are now becoming more and more apparent. And now you, as a member of the public, are writing to this newspaper article and just voicing your concern in this particular case. Now, when it comes to an application for a vacant post, typically this is your covering letter, if you will. That's now indicating not only your address, but the actual address of the organization that you are applying to, together with, a couple of lines, a couple of paragraphs that are just introducing yourself, elaborating on why it is that you are applying, and just giving the organization the indication that you are hoping to discuss your application further, perhaps in the form of an interview, and as to why you can contribute significantly to that organization. So remember, section A is out of 50, section B is out of 50, which would then total 100. Section A, you need to write 1 essay. Section B, you need to write 2 transactional texts. So when it comes to your transactional text, don't forget that you are to write and edit a draft text, use ideas from the plan, edit the draft by correcting any grammar, punctuation, spelling, or format errors, and then eventually produce the final product, so that as to, of course, give the examiner a good sense as to what you have had to offer in terms of your particular presentation. Well, thank you once again for tuning into the online learning channel. I trust that you have learned a great deal today about not only essay writing, but also transactional texts and all the methods and all the approaches that go into preparing for not only an essay, but also a transactional text. And I think when it comes to this particular, say, paper, the important thing is that you need to be comfortable with the topic. You have to be familiar with your topic in terms of not necessarily having your own experiences that you would like to share, but just being able to elaborate in a creative manner, in a unique manner, in an authentic manner that makes use of your imagination and gives you the license to produce a product that is essentially one of a kind. So thank you once again for tuning into the online learning channel. My name is Brad, and we will see you next time. Thank you.